Aloha everybody.
Aloha everyone.
Today we're going to be working on some of the joint locks that someone had questions about before, and I think Professor Kaya has something to share as well.
I do, so show and tell. So welcome to our Instagram Live and show and tell. So first of all, this is a patch that John Saxon had exact replicas made of the one he wore in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. And I'm very grateful to have met him and trained with him. In college, I went to a film festival that he was at, and the film festival had nothing to do with martial arts though. It was for a movie he did in the 1950s called The Reluctant Debutante, where it's Sandra Dee is this girl and Rex Harrison is her father, Kate Kendall's her mother, and it's this total 1950s cheesy romance kind of movie. And John Saxon's this young American guy that inherits being a count in Italy, and so it's this whole will they or won't they thing. So, which has nothing to do with martial arts. But why it's relevant is I was in a film playing the bad guy of the high school, and the stunt coordinator on that said that I reminded him a little bit of a young John Saxon because they had worked together. Now, what I didn't know is that in my head, especially as a teenager, when I think of John Saxon, I think of Enter the Dragon and Bruce Lee, right?
Right, yeah.
But actually, he was talking about way before that when he was a bit of a teen idol, and he was doing a movie called The Unguarded Moment with Esther Williams, the swimmer, where he's like a psycho murderer.
Wow.
So I'm like, wait a second. You remind me of not Roper, but of a psycho murderer? That's not so good, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, I shared that with John Saxon when I met him, and I didn't expect to see him again, but I invited him to our class, and I was super surprised that he actually showed up. And he showed up bringing his workout gear and everything, and he was totally down. I was amazed, actually, that he shared in the class with us. In fact, one of the techniques that we do today, I'll do something that he did when he came to our college club class to share with you. So that was show and tell number one.
Which is relevant because John Saxon actually passed away just last week.
Yes.
And also, I was watching The Enter Dragon yesterday or last night because it's on HBO Max. If you guys have HBO Max, you can stream it online. So that's what I was doing yesterday. So it's memory of John Saxon and Bruce Lee. Yeah.
Plus, Enter the Dragon, I must have 4 or 5 different versions of that. Like, it literally was one of the first films I ever got on DVD back in the day when DVD first became a thing, right? And then there was Blu-ray. Gotta have Enter the Dragon on Blu-ray.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And then the Lee family made a newer version of it.
That's high definition. I actually was there for the premiere. It was in Las Vegas, and Shanlini was there, and there's a picture of me somewhere way back in Instagram where we're both like in the picture together, and you can see Enter Dragon playing in the background, and a picture of Bruce Lee at the same time at that moment, right?
So yes, Sifu Nate got to be there for the premiere of that, and that's actually how I heard about it was through my student Sifu Nate here. So I did invest in that, even though I wasn't able to go to Las Vegas with him that time. But so I got that one, and then they did a Blu-ray version of that one. So I mean, I'm a sucker for this, right? So like anytime it's one of my favorite films. So anytime another version comes out. But why it's super special with John Saxon is he's the only one of the main characters that I actually got to meet and train with. And it very much was deeply affecting because it was that feeling that I had when I first met Guro Dan and was invited by Wally J to Wally J's high school camp, Camp Donzanru. and was able to train with Wally J and James DeMille and Guro Dan Inosanto together, knowing they were all friends and students and training partners of Bruce Lee. And in fact, because Sifu Nate brought it up with the locks, there's a specific thing that I trained with Professor Wally J, that he trained with Bruce Lee, that because that was going on right then, meaning in college, I was regularly still training with Professor J.
Yeah.
So I showed something from that training to John Saxon, which he thought was kind of cool. And then I already in my mind was thinking I was going to share that, not knowing Sifu Nate was going to come here and say, hey, someone asked questions about locks. Well, perfect, because I already had something in mind for that. So anyway, that's show and tell number one. Is our heart goes out to John Saxon and his family. That blessings upon you and your family, sir, and it was a deep honor to meet you. Aloha e malama pono, mahalo ni loa. The second show and tell is this morning. Another one of my teachers, Sifu Tim Tackett, who Sifu Nate has also had the opportunity to come and train with Sifu Tackett in his Wednesday night group at his home. And this morning, Sifu Tackett was talking about an article he wrote for Black Belt Magazine. And if you look at my Instagram, coach_Kai_Lee, spelled L-I, then that's actually one of the most recent posts today, is that I go to the mailbox after talking with Sifu Tackett about his article, and it shows up in the mail, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And then, then I do this like cool Bew thing, and then the, plastic opens, right? So anyway, Sifu Tackett wrote an article on the essential principles of Jeet Kune Do, and I literally just received this in the mail moments ago. So I'm going to be going over this tonight, and those of you who train with us on our YouTube live, that's going to be Friday.
Friday, yes.
Yes.
Friday.
Then he and I will prepare a lesson based on this article.
Friday at 2
specifically.
p.m. Hawaii time.
Yeah, Friday at 2 p.m. on the Ninja Nate YouTube channel. So I'm going to be reading this article, and out of respect to Sifu Tackett, we'll cover a few of these principles that he finds essential in his article, which I actually haven't read yet. But I will read it, and I will formulate a lesson plan to share with you on Friday, if you tune in for that. So that's the show and tell honoring John Saxon. Now, ironically, John Saxon passed away the day after our tribute to Guro Dan Inosanto.
Yeah.
And they're roughly the same age. John Saxon passed away at 83, but he was going to be 84 in days. I mean, like, he was almost 84. And Guro Dan just turned 84.
Yeah.
So literally their birthdays are actually quite close together. So this is, a very profound week in terms of the, founding
Jeet Kune Do,
core
yeah,
Jeet Kune Do, friends of Bruce Lee, and
friends
influences,
yeah.
because we have the birthday of Guro Dan, followed by the unfortunate, sad passing of John Saxon, who...
and it was the anniversary of Bruce Lee's death,
yes,
2 days before.
just before Dan Inosanto's
Yeah.
birthday, that same week. So literally within 7 days, you have the anniversary of Bruce Lee's passing, followed by the birthday of his friend, Guro Dan Inosanto, followed by the passing now, as opposed to back in 1973, of John Saxon, who, really was quite genuinely interested in the martial arts from a philosophical perspective. That really surprised me. So it really surprised me that he was so interested in that. Like, he actually wanted to know if there were college classes on martial arts philosophy.
Really?
And there weren't, right?
There weren't, right. Yeah.
But there should be. I mean, he had a good point.
Yeah,
they're
mixed in only very small bits of
Yes.
here and there in philosophy classes. Yeah.
Yes, there's little bits here and there. There, I do
It's not-
remember
yeah.
that there was a school on the East Coast in Virginia
Mhm.
that Joe Lewis and Bill Wallace were involved with that did have, and Jerry Beasley of Jeet Kune
Right.
had a program where you could get some kind of degree that was related to the martial arts. But in any event, John Saxon actually felt that it was very valuable that you could have a whole course of study over a full semester, studying just that aspect. And he had a very defined presence about him in sharing that, a very genuine interest, which was touching to us because here he was, this older guy, and we really never thought we were going to see him again.
Yeah.
But he showed up at the class, and not just to watch or take a picture, but he showed up to work out. I mean,
Mhm. That's cool.
that
Yeah.
amazed me.
Wow.
It really did. So that's the opening, if you will, that we're honoring in this past week, the anniversary of the passing of Bruce Lee, the birthday of Guro Dan Inosanto, the passing of John Saxon, and the continuing to grow and thrive article by Sifu Tim Tackett. Now I'm pointing that out because it's a little bit of a mountain and a valley, right? You have the sadness of people passing, and then you have the joy of celebrating a birthday, then the sadness of someone passing, and then the joy that someone as accomplished as Sifu Tackett is still actively engaged in the process. And
Yeah.
he's really quite a remarkably intelligent man, Sifu Tackett. And he also helped other people with their book projects, including Sifu Larry Hartzell. So there's a lot there, to appreciate. And so I'm looking forward to Sifu Tim's article. So now going back to what Sifu Nate was mentioning about locks, I'd actually like to start with something that's a good warm-up, that even if you don't have a partner, like right now he and I have a partner because we're here together for you, but even if you don't have a partner, you can actually practice a lot of core locks just with your own hands. And this sort of pattern was something that was very helpful, not just in warming up, but also in terms of strengthening. Because if you take someone's hand, right, and you put torsion on it, suddenly that's going to be quite painful. But if you put torsion on your own hand, then you constantly achieve a new normal. And that's a shout out to Sifu Christopher Kent, who really doesn't like the term the new normal. So I'm trying to make a new way of thinking of a new normal in the sense of training progression, right? So instead of thinking of it as this whole hassle that we have to deal with in a global pandemic, instead I'm saying, hey, maybe this was my comfort range of motion without pain, but then now if I keep training, that can go further and further, and you have a new baseline or a new normal. But just every day in every way, it's very subtle, but part of the journey with Jeet Kune in particular is actually to have many influences. So even though I'm Sifu Nate's primary teacher, through our training together, I've introduced him to all of my teachers that I could. And so in that sense, then he ends up with many teachers. And certainly that's true for me, where I was introduced to the art by Professor Wally J introducing me to Guro Dan and James DeMille, but then Guro Dan introduced me to Richard Pastillo, who became my primary teacher. But I was always encouraged, as you have been, we are always encouraged to learn from and train with whoever we can to continue to grow and evolve. And that's an important aspect, and it's fairly unique, because in a lot of martial arts that's not encouraged. You're just supposed to do the one thing.
True. Yeah.
And in this sense, it's sort of the opposite, where everyone's path is going to be slightly different because each one of us is unique. And so your perception and your evolution is going to be unique to you. So let's try this together. So the first is, you're going to take your hand and you're going to rotate it without doing anything. Then, to learn proper placement, the 3 fingers are going to go right on the inside of the pad of the hand there. Your thumb is going to go on your ring finger knuckle, all right? And then there's more than one motion here. In a lot of classes, you'll see people just going downward, right? But what we want to do is actually work our way through all the different range of motions. So on a horizontal spiral, we're going to have rotation and torsion. And then we're going to have both depression and elevation. So in other words, the torque is continuous, but then this becomes not static. So instead of it just being a static kind of stretch,
right,
what we're wanting to have it become is more active and also progressive in the sense of going through a range of motion that makes the tendons and ligaments more comfortable, allows your nervous system to calm down so you're a little bit less affected by pain, and also encourages solid technique, right? So in other words, if I'm here, I want to make sure that I have the solid technique, right? Or if you're doing it to me, right? If he wants to make sure that he has the solid technique, right? So the placement is actually kind of important. Now this is literally one of the most common locks, right? Commonly known as the wrist lock, or in Korinkan Danzanru, Katate Tori, or in Aikido and many traditional Jiu-Jitsu styles, Kotagaish, right? So the terminology can be different. It's also very core in Hapkido and many other martial arts. Going back to the Chinese Qinna, right? The source material that led to the Jiu-Jitsu and the Hapkido and everything else. Another thing that we are doing, because we also both have studied Hapkido under my Hapkido teacher, Grandmaster Jihan Jae, and trained in Korea. Nate also brought him up there to train in Korea and test to become black belt in Hapkido. He did quite well, being able to actually double test and become a second degree black belt during his journey in Korea. So one of the things that is very present in Hapkido is, and you say it better,
Hapki. Hapki. Right.
He has a way of saying it with the enthusiasm that you feel when you're there, because it's like in Hawaii us going like this, right? Going shaka bra, what's up, right? In Korea, with the Hapkido guys, it's like Hapki, Hapki, Hapki. So, anyway, now the thing is, there's the esoteric side of that, where you're transferring key energy, right? But there's also the biomechanical. The biomechanical aspect of this is it does change the focus of your muscles and your grip. So, similar to holding a firearm. If you were going to hold a pistol, you'd have the discipline of keeping your finger off the trigger, right? But it also changes where your grip is. So if you folks do pull-ups, you'll notice this, that if you emphasize this grip, you're actually a little weaker than if you emphasize this grip. So when you're doing these joint locks, you actually have a little bit more torsal strength in emphasizing the bottom part of the hand going across the palm versus emphasizing this part. Now, an anthropologist is the one who shared with me that there was a reason for that. That when your index finger and thumb connect, your brain automatically feels that you're holding a tool. You know, like you'd be writing something or using a hammer or something. So it automatically thinks that you're using a tool, as where when your emphasis is on the bottom, it more thinks like you're swinging from a vine like Tarzan. So it's actually stronger, and this is definitely true if you test it. And we do like to pressure test everything. That's certainly an influence from Sifu Richard Bastillo, our friend Guro Burton Richardson, You know, pretty much there's a lot of people within the community of Junfan JKD. You don't know if it works unless you pressure test it, right? So you can actually test this. That if I'm grabbing his wrist and I emphasize the index finger part, it's easier for him to escape, right? But if I leave my index finger out because, you know, hapki, if I leave my index finger out, then it's much more difficult for him. It completely changes the angle, right? And it makes it almost impossible to get out without having to use your other hand. So, like, that's significant, right? So when you're working these locks, first we're working on this warm-up, but we're trying to share with you that the warm-up is actually giving you multiple things. You're going through, on the receiving end, the range of motion, right? You're also, secondly, decreasing your pain, the how soon you would feel the pain, your comfort level with the discomfort, you know, your adaptation, if you will, right? Improvise, adapt, overcome. Your ability to adapt to the situation that you're being given, which is discomfort. And then you're also learning how to apply the technique. So there's the physicality of the receiving end, then there's the mental emotional composure of receiving pain, and then there's the actual technique itself. So this would be the first one, which it actually doesn't matter so much the order, but the reason I'm showing you this one first is it is the most common wrist lock in the martial arts by far. I mean, it's all over the place across the spectrum of every martial art that does this. Now, here's the thing that's a little tricky that I do. When I switch, I don't just do, oh, whatever. Okay? So I'm going to start like I'm opening a fan, like I'm opening a Japanese fan. I'm going to extend my hand to the other hand. So it becomes almost like a Chin-na grappling version of Chi-sao, that there's constant contact. Think about it, the tendons and ligaments, the sinew in your body, if they were like rubber bands, you wouldn't want to just put them on torsion and then let go. It's going to be very sore. But if you practice undoing that torsion and rotating to the other side, now you're mastering that transition. And mastering that transition is going to be valuable to you, whether you're tori or uke, whether you're the one doing the technique or whether you're the one on the receiving end. What do I mean by this? Okay, so if I have his hand here and he is moving, right, because he's in pain, so he wants to adjust the angle. If I am quite good at this, I can change it to make it easier for him to have to adapt, right? So he's learning how to adapt. We're both training. It's not just that I'm doing something, it's that he's doing something as well. I'm adapting to his attempted escape, and he's adapting to my attempted lock, and then I'm counter-adapting to the escape. Now this becomes super critical once it switches. Go ahead. So he's here. Let's make it where you're in there. So he's here and he's doing the technique to me, right? Now what did I show you in the warm-up? I did this thing with my fingers, right? Watch. Okay, I'll do that again way slower. So he's here. He wants me to go this way. I go there before he wants me there. In other words, he wants me there, but I go there ahead of him. The angle is set, and now the lock is there. Does this make sense? Go on this side. He wants me to go. I go there ahead of this. It's like Chi-sao. It's like an energy drill. He has me in the lock. I flow out of the lock and put him in the lock. Okay? Now, he would finger by finger flow out of the lock, rotate me around, and get me in the lock. Right? See it? and then you go ahead. Okay? Now, tactically, you would do 2 hands, as Sifu Nate is doing, right? But there's a reason why I'm not doing that. The reason why I'm not doing that is I'm trying to improve my tendon strength and coordination. So this is a flow where all I do is pass it, right? Instead of actually lock it. Because if I actually lock it, then that escape is quite difficult.
Yeah.
But the point of this is not the escape. The point of this is mastering the flow. That in so many different martial arts paradigms, things only exist in a box, right? Where here comes the attack, hi-ya, and then here comes the defense, hi-ya, right?
Yeah.
But in real life, you don't know where you're going to start, right? You don't know. I mean, we could have a 2020 COVID-19 global pandemic paradigm. I want to take off your mask to give you the virus. And then he's like, no, you can't do that to me. Right? So that could be like a new one-step self-defense technique, right? For a traditional martial art. Mass defense, you know?
Right.
You come up, you get the ear, then your other hand makes sure that ear loop doesn't come off, and then anyway. You're very creative with this. So the concept, though, is if you're practicing this, see that you're practicing more than one thing. So we're here. We're doing our lock. Then we're going to rotate and switch. And we're here. And then we rotate and switch. And then we're here. So it's like a blossoming flower. Okay? There's an ebb and a flow to it, like a blossoming flower. Okay? So now you're kind of good at that one, right? So then let's take a look at the next one. So one of the next most commons, besides the outward rotational wrist lock, is the opposite. Okay? And this one is actually more than one lock, as you may or may not know. So you have this version, which is hard to do to yourself, right? Which is if you look at this one as being an outward wrist lock, then this one would be an inward wrist lock. Now that one is bad enough. Once that is here though, it's significantly worse, okay? Now you're actually doing the worst one, why? Because the other one's kind of hard to do to yourself. You can, but it's more difficult. So I have to be way out here and extend, right? And then, like we did with the other one, we're gonna lead with the pinky instead of the index finger and rotate it around to be locked. Rotate it around. Boom, okay? So that's that one. Even worse than that one though is the Zorro lock or snake lock. And we would call it that because this is like an S or a Z, right? If you were in this configuration, this would be like the letter S or the letter Z, right? So that's the one we're doing for this aspect of the warm-up. And then we come close to ourselves and turn our pinky toward our nose, which is terrible feeling. And then we go away from ourselves and turn it. And then it's when we're on our way back to ourselves that we switch that. So you're getting 2 for the price of 1 there. Okay? You understand the concept? So outward, right? Inward. The inward goes away from you, then it's still an inward, but it's an inward long, right? And then now we go to the other side, inward, inward long, right? Then if you wanted to, you could go back to the first one. So if you only knew these first 2, you could transition back and forth, and you could do this instead of playing with your phone. You could do this when you're waiting in line 6 feet away from somebody.
Right.
or when you're name some
That's
cool
true.
activities.
Oh yeah, like when I'm waiting. Actually, I do this a lot on my free time as well. When I'm walking between places, I'm just doing maybe some stretches, and same thing. Like also trying to transition a little bit to each one, or sitting and waiting for an office. You know, you could be doing that, or in between typing if you're working on the computer a lot, you could do some work and then take a 5-minute break, do some stretches. You know, I don't know, like different things where you have downtime in between places you're going to or things you're working on in terms of work. It's a great one, and actually I showed this to one of my students for gymnastics because she complained of like wrist pain a lot because she's doing back handsprings right now. She's doing a lot of impact here. So one is strengthening, so I have her hold handstands for a while and also do like strengthening of that, but also the stretching is part of it too. And then again, this does stretch and strengthen those ligaments and tendons as well. So yeah,
and you need
great.
both. And you need both. I mean, just flexibility without the strength to back it up can actually cause injuries. Right. So, and just strength without range of motion can make you very stiff.
Yeah.
So you really do want to develop both. You want to cultivate having functional strength in range of motion. So that would be the first two. It'd be the outward wrist lock and the inward wrist lock. Okay. Now if I want to add more to that mix, the next one that we normally do is the outside extension. So for that, your thumb is a bar underneath your knuckles and your hand. Make sure you have the end. That is critical. I'll show you why. If I'm here and I have the end with this lock, he is quite immobilized. And there are a lot of fun things you can do, right? I can step in front of him and trip him. I can bring his face into the camera, wah, right? So on and so forth. But now reverse roles, do that to me. Okay, but on purpose, look what I'm doing. You see how I curl my middle finger? So he's got me extended, but I curl my little finger and my middle finger and my ring finger. I'm curling the base of my hand, which means the tendon's not fully extended. So even though he has the position correct, go ahead, I'm not tapping because I'm doing a little trick to make it hard for him to finish. Now this kind of subtlety is not going to be achievable unless you're doing these subtle aspects of the warm-up and fine points of the technique that I'm sharing with you, because it allows you that little tiny change that creates a huge effect. It's like if you had a bicycle chain and then you just stuck an ordinary finishing nail in the chain, then when it gets to the wheel, it's going to derail the chain and it doesn't work anymore. So even though he has me in full extension, that little change is buying me time where even though I'm extended, I'm not in a lot of pain, so I'm not having to tippy toe, right? And now this allows me the opportunity to change the reference point. Okay, so then I am able to put him in a lock to counter. So obviously we can't cover every single paradigm in a short Instagram Live, but what I want you to see is that these things don't really exist in isolation. There are so many of these. I mean, there are a dozen basic ones that we teach, and then in a special program that we did called One Touch, which was a program for the blind. There was a whole sequence of lock flow that we did for that. Guro Dan has a lock flow that he shares. A lot of the other instructors in Jeet Kune have a way to help you remember the lock flow.
And actually, it's really interesting that this was added again with Wally J with Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune, and it's a good bridge between another step from trapping to grappling, because that lock can also turn into throws. So that lock helps you not just, if you don't have a gi on and all that, these locks put them in positions where I'm off balance, and that can lead them right into throws. So it's a way to standing armbar, standing shoulder lock, standing wrist lock, hold the person there, standing, but they'll automatically, you can already lead them right to the ground from that position. So from trapping, you can do that, because if you're in trapping, you slow down that hand and you isolate it. That's when these locks can be done much easier, because I can't catch it in the air, right, and then just go into a lock. I need to isolate one of the arms, and that happens with trapping. So after I'm maybe in boxing range, I'm trading punches and dodging, and then I get into a trapping range and I lock, then I've got the hand now, and now I can pull it over and then do a lock, and then that could lead to a throw, which could lead to the ground, which I could either pin them on the ground or continue to strike.
And think of the terminology. So Sifu mentioned trapping, right? And that is the popular term that everyone in Junfan and Jeet Kune uses. But the word trapping and the word isolation are very much compatible words. So this is actually what we were getting at anyway, in the sense of Wally J and Bruce Lee at that time in their initial meeting. Wally J is now world famous for small circle jiu-jitsu, where he utilized all of the principles and tightened up his art, partly influenced by his friendship with Bruce Lee, to add so much subtlety and detail to what originally were techniques in kata, meaning there was a catalog, right, like a list of techniques to help you remember them, that you would practice in a particular order, right? And then the differences with Bruce Lee's influence is there was a very strong feeling that, well, that's nice to learn it, but to actually do it for real, you can't be trapped in the list. You have to feel what the other person's giving you and respond to it spontaneously. Now, one of the things that Bruce Lee shared with Professor J was, at that time, his modified Junfan Kung Fu, which was built upon Wing Chun, boxing, and fencing. Now, part of that was Chi Sao. One of the things that made Professor Wally J laugh like a little kid was when he could meet someone that knew Wing Chun or Jeet Kune Do, that knows Chi Sao, and surprise them with his ability to apply small circle jiu-jitsu in that context. So I'll give you an example. So we're here and we're doing Chi Sao, right? So all throughout this, there's the first lock we showed you, right? All throughout this, there's the second lock we showed you, right? You're seeing how this is happening? See this? There's the third lock, right? So the other difference is that classically, it's the whole hand, but if you were paying attention to what I just did, I'll do it really slow. I didn't have the whole hand. I took his index finger and then fed his ring finger. So I only had 2 fingers instead of all of them, making it harder for him to do that defense that I demonstrated earlier. So, and then you can go on the tricep tendon and accelerate the problem for him. But basically, Professor J figured out how valuable it was to take the Yubi-Tori principle. Now, Yubi-Tori is a technique in Kodokan Danzanryu Jiu-Jitsu his teacher Wally J taught, and it's to compress the digit in and upon itself, right? So you're taking the tip of the finger into the second digit joint, compressing it in, and then torquing it just a little bit. So Professor J also taught that in extension, where this is like a video game joystick. You create a base, and then you're tightening in on that base. So why am I bringing this up? Because then all the classical locks can then be done off of just a digit. So that is compressing the thumb and torquing the thumb, but it creates the effect of the outside wrist lock, right?
Yeah.
Here, you can take just a finger and create the same effect of the reverse wrist lock, right? And the one we just showed you here, right? Because that's another variation of that technique. But all of these can be done off of the roll, off of the Chi Sao, and also off of other energy exercises, right? So if we were in wrestling here, right? And so we're going in here, right? And we're doing this exchange. Anywhere in here, boom, there's my wrist lock, right? Anywhere in here, there's my wrist lock, right? Okay? All over the place, those opportunities exist. Let's say we're doing hubad, right? Okay, anywhere in hubad, I can do one of these locks, right? Anywhere in there, we can do it. And there's many variations of hubad, right? I can intersect this way, or I can intersect as an outside pass. So, but there's all kinds of opportunities to go into these locks from the energy flow drill, right? So, regardless of which martial art base you come from, if there's an energy flow type of drill, like pummeling and wrestling, or Chisao in Wing Chun, or hubad in Filipino martial arts, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's an opportunity in there to be able to access your locks. And so far, this is kind of introduction where all I want you to have known so far is to be able to do this warm-up, transition to this warm-up, right? Then to transition to this warm-up, then to transition to this warm-up, and then to be able to do that extended, right? And then to be able to do this is the third one really, which would be the finger extension, but you got to make sure you have the tips. Otherwise you won't get the tendon stretch here. So you got to make sure you got the tips of the fingers there to get the full extension. Then with your thumb in the base of between the middle finger and ring finger metacarpal, the bones leading up to your flanges, leading up to your fingers. From there, right, you would just rotate it to the other side. And this is sort of unique in the sense that this is not how it was taught to me at all. Mm-hmm. On my own, I decided it was more valuable to me to never have a break in contact, to do all of these types of warm-ups continuously while maintaining touch sensitivity. And in that sense, I could train by myself and get something out of it, right? So I would do this on the bus or on the train or whatever when I was in school. And, you know, people look at you funny, but they don't really know what you're doing. Unless you're wearing a Bruce Lee UFC shirt. Then maybe they have an idea of it. So this would be the third one, would be that extension here. Mm-hmm. And then the next one would be the gooseneck. So the lock this way. Bringing your elbows together with your wrist on top of the knuckles would be this type of lock here. And then starting with the finger, you're going to go around the other hand. Then starting with the finger, you go around the other hand. And someone smarter than me probably thought of this too. This is just one of these things that I experimented with and started applying. Right? And there are way more than this, but in one live session, I don't want to give you so much that you don't remember anything. So that would give you 4 basic ones, right? In terms of compression and extension, right? What do I mean by that? So this is outward rotation, this is inward rotation, this would be extension, and this would be compression, right? So you could do the same with the fingers. We can create compression in a finger, or we can create extension in a finger. You do want to create a base though. So you'll see that that's one of the principles that Wally J taught, was always create a base. You want to make it where the other person doesn't really have an escape route, right? I'll let Sifu Nate demonstrate because I'm the larger person, and one of Professor J's famous things would be like, now listen here, you, right? So he does the lock to me, but because he's creating a base, I can't escape the lock. I'm like, uncomfortable, pain, I must achieve a new normal. Just kidding. But, you know, basically, because I don't have the escape route, as where if he didn't have the base, what would someone look like? It would be like a comedy show. Ow, 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 ow. But actually, if I was quite good at that, I could get out that way. Right? Does that make sense? Right. So when he sets it up, if he creates a base by preventing my escape route, then this is much more effective, and it limits my next movement. So if he has this very well suited, very well set up, then look, my ability to strike with this hand is now prevented. Structurally, he's in my way with that elbow in my rib cage, right? And I'm also in pain, and I'm also off balance, right? So, and that's one of the things that Bruce Lee spoke about is if a man's off balance, he can't fight very well.
Exactly, and that's why I was talking about with the transition right to grappling. You could throw them right from that lock. So trapping is great, but trapping with the locking, now that's much more easier to throw someone and manipulate their ability to hurt you, right? So you can stop them right in their tracks and be able to have an advantage to take them off balance. And yes, they can't fight back if they're off balance, right? Yeah.
So now if you did have a partner, this is how you would practice the 4 techniques that we went over so far. So, and we're going to be doing this back and forth, so it's not just a one-way thing. So I go the outside wrist lock, and then he's going to transition that around, and he's going to outside wrist lock me, and I'm going to transition that around, and I'm going to outside wrist lock him, right? He transitions that around, he outside wrist locks me. Now I see the other hand. I bring it outside the range, and I wrist lock. He escapes, and he wrist locks. I escape, and I wrist lock. He escapes, and then he's here. Now, I want to do the next one. I come underneath the elbow tendon, grab the outside of his fingers, pass them to myself, and now I have the outside lock, right? You see it? So you do that to me so I can just show the next part. Okay, so he's here, okay? Now, I want to slide lower onto him, take the fingers, and get him in it. Now he's gonna slide lower onto me where the arm bends. This hand can get these fingers, then he comes underneath and he gets me. I slide lower onto him, get the fingers, and I'm on him. And now here's the cool My Fair Lady part, right? Right? I could have danced all night, I could have danced all night, and still have begged for more. I could have spread my wings and done 1,000 things I've never done before. Anyway, so you can have a dance thing going on, and then now he can do that to me. So he makes this go too far, he gets this, he gets behind me, gets me in the lock, pulls me to the other side, gets me in the lock. And we're dancing with the stars, which if you add in the striking, right? If you add in the striking and the throwing to where you get dizzy or hit your head, then you do see stars. So it would be dancing with the stars in that sense anyway. So you get the concept. So then from that one, go ahead, you're having extended. So then from that one, I have the gooseneck, right? So notice that there's a subtlety here. I want my elbow in that little pocket where the subclavian artery hits below the clavicle, because it gives me a little bit more control. It's a little bit harder for him to escape. Okay? So go ahead and put me in that.
So this over, right?
Yeah. So you're going to make me short by putting your elbow in my collarbone. So there's a pressure point right there.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you're doing that with the elbow, right? Okay? So you have me in the setup, and this is in the gooseneck, and then this elbow sinks it. Yeah, see? So now I'm not a happy camper, but you guys know how to bow in Jeet Kune? You know how to bow in Kung Fu? You know how to bow in Wing Chun? One hand's open, the other hand's a fist. I put the fist in, I create a little slack in my wrist, bring this over, and I'm here. To save himself, right? So to save myself, I'll show you that because you don't really understand what I'm doing. This is gonna hurt a ton. So I take the fist and I support the part where it's going to hurt. And then I make this uncompressible. That ends up bending the wrist. The wrist comes in. This comes over and in. And boom, right? So then that becomes another whole transition or reset, right? So I'm a little bit surprising him with some of this because in my syllabus, this is kind of later in the syllabus.
Right.
So it's not something that we normally would share with beginners, so he doesn't get to practice this too often. But there is a whole thing that becomes like a dance of pain, right? Which my best friend from high school, Rick Hunter Stockton out there, he and I used to practice this a lot, and to make it fun, we would make it like this. We'd make it like a little bit of a dance. Now that's partly interesting because one of the most notable things that we've noticed over the years is that when the first generation people speak of Bruce Lee, they don't speak of him like some old master in a hill from a cave. They speak of him as a close friend. I mean, they even though he was their teacher, right? He really was the level of friend of somebody that was like your family. I mean, the love that they have, that even now, last summer at 83, Guro Dan tears in his eyes when he's talking about Bruce Lee, right? So there's something to that of leaving the ego at the door and being willing to have fun with this, right? And not minding being the one that's on the losing end of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of like when we can make this like an energy drill, like a flow drill, where it's not just a guy doing cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
So where we're both doing it. Now the second two might be a little tough for everybody, but the first one, if you watch this video carefully, you should be able to do the first one. And if you really can just get that, then we've really given you a lot today. If you can just get that one thing, which would be he has me in the wrist lock, and I know he wants me to go this way, so I go that way before him and put him in it. Now he knows I want to take him this way. He does that back to me, right? Then I see the other hand. I take it to the outside. He's going to escape and do that back to me, right? Okay? You see how this is going? Now, if I have the second hand, he sees the second hand. He takes that as the lock. I take that around. Boom, right? He takes it out, takes it to me. Boom, I see the hand, and I'm here. As we get more advanced, I know his escape route, so now I can experiment with other variations on the lock to make life more difficult. But here's the good news. If you're very good at this, it is like Chisao or pummeling or hubud, sin or Wally, all the different energy drills in the martial arts. If you get very good at this, then there's a window, right? There's a window of timing that you can always improve your position. And that's one of the things that I think is universally true at a high level of evolved martial arts, that you should never feel like, oh, because this happened, I lose and I'm done. There should always be this feeling of light at the end of the tunnel, where no matter what, there's something you can do to make your situation better than it is. And that is a good thing to think about during this global pandemic and time of social injustice and unrest and people having differences of opinion that are making people unfriend each other and unfollow each other on Facebook and Instagram. No matter how hopeless whatever your outlook might be, if you were able to see it outside your own perspective, there would be hope. So in other words, if he's only thinking about this and I'm only thinking about this, there's not too many options, right? But if we then look at it from the other person's point of view, then now you have a second perspective. Like, when you go ahead and lock me, I can feel where I'm in trouble. I'm just trying to make sure you're in there. So I can feel where I'm in trouble, and he can feel where I'm in trouble, but I can also feel where I'm not in trouble, right? Ready for a little bit of JKD? Okay, so look, I'm here, but he doesn't have the second hand. I know where the tendon is on the radius. Paksao, right? Palm strike.
Right.
Paksao to vertical fist.
If you've been doing the wooden dummy training, that's one of the things.
It's from the set, right? Okay, here's another one. Right? So there's ways that I can take this situation and turn lemons to lemonade in the sense of just reversing it, but there's also going back to your JKD, right? Going back to your core techniques and using this interface to go to your next technique, right?
Have you noticed that he also has this snapping power with the wrist already in this tension here? I'm able to whip and hit with that rotation as I'm flicking it out. Like we were talking about with even some of the sets on the wooden dummy, right? You're using that snapping energy by rotation either inward or outward.
It's like a slingshot,
right? Yeah.
It's like a slingshot because it's already loaded.
Yeah.
So the moment the tension is released, allow that tension to become your friend.
Yeah.
Allow that wind up to just deploy, right?
That
it's like you're holding a hair tie and going, wah, right? Or a rubber band and going, wah, right? So you're already in tension, but now instead of that being something bad, you're already loaded like an archer. You're already loaded where the bow is now a compound bow and giving the arrow some extra kabanga-wanga, right? And in Wing Chun we have the arrow punch, right?
And
so
that's like the release part. The Paksao is you just releasing that energy, boom, and now it's ready to fire. That letting go part is a boom, the Paksao. The only person holding you is the other guy. You just take that hand away and boom, and you're ready.
Yes.
Snap the hand out.
So that, I mean, therein, right, you have where what someone else might see as a prison is actually the slingshot to your escape, right? It's actually a gift. The other person is putting you something, you're like, thank you, boom, thank you, right? So there's another way to look at that, right? So if all you got out of today's session is a little more details on the outside wrist lock, also known as katate tori or kotagaishi, okay? If all you got is that, you got a lot. Now, if you add to that you're building strength and range of motion in this, right? Then there's another level, that's be level 2. Level 3, are you getting really good accuracy in how you line up your grip, right? Level 4, we're gonna remind you of Jihan J and Hapkido. Ready?
Hapki!
Hapki! Hapki! Yeah, right on, okay? You guys see it? So, that would be level 4, right? And level 5 is gonna be reversing that. Then he has me in the lock, right? I'm like, okay, thank you very much. Now I have you in the lock. Now he goes, oh, thank you very much. He has me in the lock, right? That'd be level 5. Level 6 is being able to reverse the reversal. Layer 7 is being able to turn that into a window for your other techniques, right? And we could go on from there. But what I want you to see is something that is as simple as, okay, we're going to do outside wrist lock, actually is a layer cake. Where there's
a lot of things you can get out of that one.
Yeah, there's all these other things you can get out of that one thing. So
we're 50 seconds away, so we're going to wrap it up in a second.
Yes.
What was the last comment you were going to say? Go ahead.
All I was going to say is, use that lesson for today. Never lose hope. No matter how bad your situation is, there's a way out. And never get bored. No matter how simple a technique is, there are other layers that you can train.
All right, and that's it. We're perfectly on time, 30 seconds to go. Thanks again, you guys. I'll see you guys next week. And if you're going to check out your YouTube live, that's going to be Friday at 2 p.m. Aloha.
Mahalo nui loa.